with their families, and they are basically orphaned. And then you have other boys who just realize how completely ridiculous the whole thing is, and they leave on their own accord. But there are a bunch of young men who have no social skills. The only skill they have really is construction, so thank God at least they have something. But they have no social skills, no education, and they're forced out into a world they've been told their entire life to fear. And I think that's the hardest part, because they're raised from birth being told the world is evil, this world is out to steal your soul, the Gentiles are out to get you, and that you will go to hell if you go out there in the real world. But then suddenly they're thrust out in there and have to figure out how to navigate it on their own, with the assumption that just because they have left, now they are spending an eternity in hell. And the amount of guilt is amazing these kids are stuck with.
How many people do they believe in that group are going to be saved? So
144,000.
144,000, that's right. Can you tell me about the 144,000, what that is?
Well, I think every religion believes that they are the chosen 144,000. And that they are the chosen Zion. And that everyone else will be wiped off the earth, and only 144,000 people will be taken up or ascended into heaven while everyone else is wiped off the earth. And this comes from biblical, I don't know if it's in Daniel or if it's in Revelations, but it was foreseen thousands of years ago that there would be 144,000 people chosen. Mm-hmm. So every religion, at least fundamentalist religions, believe that they are the 144,000.
Can you tell me about the movie that the government made up and told the world that there were men walking on the moon?
Oh, you gotta love conspiracy theorists. There's one for every corner.
Does this have something to do with polygamy?
Oh, this is totally a conspiracy. There were so many people in these fundamentalist groups, and Hinesdale is one of them, of course, that really believe that so much of what is on the media and so much of what our government tells us is a conspiracy. And one of those conspiracies was that we have never landed on the moon. There were never any spaceships. And that the whole landing on the moon thing was a conspiracy by our government to get money out of us.
So there was no such thing as men going to the moon?
No such thing as men going to the moon. No. And they even tried to deny that there was no such thing as airplanes, but at some point you had to accept the fact that the things flying over and making all the noise were actually man-made.
Can you tell me what happened with Warren when he was trying to get the power with the 21 men kicked out of the group, and how that political shakeup happened?
I'm trying to do this from memory of the book, but I read at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Or do you want to talk about what the blood atonement is?
Blood atonement's interesting. I actually didn't even know about it until I read John Krakauer's book.
Oh, well, never mind that then.
But it makes sense now. I understand why Roland Allred was murdered.
Can you talk about how, if people from the public are allowed in the meeting house, the church?
Yeah, you know, I think this is pretty standard across all of these fundamentalist groups, and especially those that are more cult-like, as with the FLDS, that outsiders are just not welcome. But first of all, we need to consider that that people in these communities consider all outsiders to be Gentiles, and Gentiles are evil, and Gentiles will bring their evil ideas. So they're not welcome in the communities to begin with, and that it's almost like they'll bring their disease of truth into the community, or disease of corruption as the communities consider them, but definitely not allowed into the meeting halls or into any of the ceremonies. That would be a corruption of their religion.
Why is nobody that's born there, why is everybody in the outside world have impure blood? Why do they believe in Can you just talk about the fact that they just all have sex with each other?
They don't marry each other?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Your brother, your sister. And
They have this belief that's called Oh my gosh, I just blanked on it. The pure blood doctrine. It's an actual doctrine where they believe that only certain families are entitled to exaltation. Now, exaltation is this belief that men who have enough wives and who have proven themselves worthy in this life get to be exalted and get to be gods of their own planet in the future. What I find fascinating is that men get to be gods and women get to be the consorts to gods. They don't actually get to be called goddesses. They're just get the privilege of being married to a god. So part of this belief is this pure blood that only those with the right last names marry each other and propagate so that you don't have any outside blood that is breaking down the DNA of basically the ones who have the rightful place to exaltation, and outside blood would ruin that whole entire plan. So
21 men were expelled from the community all at once in the middle of a day at church. And what happens to women and the families when men are expelled by Warren? If you could start like at the beginning, like when Warren expels people and how and why.
Well, I think Warren expels people because it is a show of his power and his control. And it's interesting that he chose the number that he chose. I think he started first with 1 to see what would happen, and people accepted it. So then he tried 21. Well, what if I excommunicate 21 men? What will happen? Well, there will be a rebellion. He excommunicated 21 men, and there wasn't a rebellion. People just accepted what he said. I think it was a test. And so what happens when he excommunicates these men, he deems them unworthy. He asks men to provide him with a list. He'll say something like, God has told me that you have sinned. Now I need you to provide me a list of all of the sins you've committed and then compare your list with the list that God has given me. And then he uses that list as blackmail against them. So he has a list on everyone. And he just refers to that list when he wants to oust someone. And then what happens is that as a man is deemed unworthy, he's excommunicated from the church, basically told he will spend his eternity in hell. He has to repent from afar from something he doesn't even know what he's supposed to repent from. And in the meantime, his wives and his children are then assigned to another man who is deemed more worthy.
Right.
So you have these children, some of them who have grown up with a half a dozen different fathers. They don't know what their last name is. They have no identity at all. And the same thing with these women who are just traded around like livestock. And assume that the man they're with is going to be the one that takes them to heaven.
Right. One more thing. What did Warren Jeffs tell the group while he was gone? First of all, he's jacking off in prison, but then he told the entire group in the city not to have sex while he was in jail for life, and then how that changed back and forth,
Oh, yeah, it was really interesting as while I was in Colorado City, I started hearing this story about how Warren had told people that as long as he wasn't able to have relationships with his wives, that none of the other people in the community, in the FLDS, were allowed to either. Two things: he's the only person that could perform marriages, so no marriages are being performed right now. This is great for the little girls. They might actually have a chance to grow up and have somewhat normal lives, at least to have a chance to get to be teenagers and enjoy their teenage years. So basically what he has said is no marriages as long as he's in prison, and no relationships. And basically what he has told the people through his brother Lyle is that if I see any pregnancies that obviously happened after my prison date, you will be excommunicated. This is another test of his power and control over people. And what's interesting, while we were there, we started hearing stories of men who were going into drugstores in the nearby cities and buying condoms. so that they could have relationships with their
And
wives.
Now, actually, Willie and the God Squad, people in the God Squad have to witness the sex with permission from the prophet in jail. They can have sex now as long as they get permission and as long as there's